Welcome. Thank you for joining the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston this morning. I'm Carol Burris, Director of Religious Community. We are arguably living through a great age of propaganda. How can we find truth at such a time? And how can direct experience of awe and wonder help us discover it? Dr. Bossen tackles these difficult questions this morning in his sermon, Truth and Lies. For those of you new to our congregation or our online services, I invite you to continue watching after the benediction to hear more about Unitarian Universalism. We now invite you to hear our call to worship.
These are the days that we have been given. Days of sickness and isolation, days of disruption, days of anxiety, days of discomfort, days when we might find ourselves longing for human connection, for physical touch, for the rhythm of life as it used to be. But these are the days we have been given, and though they are strange days, days that are unlike any other, they are our days to use. Outside, the trees are still green. The sun continues to brighten the earth. Our muddy blue ball of a planet persists in its dance around the yellow day star. In these days that we have been given, these are the days that we have been given. Whoever you are, whether you regularly attend our services or are joining us for the first time online, we welcome you and whatever this day brings. We invite you to remember that whichever days we have been given, be they strange or beautiful days, they are ours to make the most of. And so, let us make the most of this day, and come, let us worship.
Celebremos compartiendo nuestras vidas, encendiendo esta luz. Gather the Spirit, harvest the power, our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour, our trials in this light appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion, and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of heart and mind, see toward the sowing art laid in store, nurture in love and conscience refined, with body and spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion, and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit growing in all, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun, winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion, and strength, gather to celebrate once again.
Please join with me in the spirit that some call prayer and others name meditation. Open yourself to the possibility of mystery and wonder that is within us and around us at all times. Find your center. Ground yourself in the now, in the what is, and as you do, open yourself to compassion. Compassion. Care for the other. It is what is so needed in this time of plague and pestilence. As the rich grow ever richer, we are called to be compassionate to the all who are, to demand health care, vaccines, be available for all who need them, not just here in the United States, but throughout the world, to see that no one goes hungry on a planet of plenty, to ensure that all children have access to education and all families have homes where they can stay safely without fear of eviction. Compassion. It is what we are called to, and it is what, with this prayer, we call upon the world's leaders and all who would spur them to action, which is to say each of us, when we unite hands and hearts, to open ourselves to. Compassion. It is what will end this pandemic and bring about brighter days. Compassion. May our time together and my words cause its increase, its expansion, and its ever-growing residence in human hearts. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. We pause now together to lift up that which sits heavy and light on our hearts. We lift up Eileen Hernandez, daughter of Doug and Lindy Cohn, who has fallen ill with the coronavirus. We are keeping her and her family in our prayers and send our wishes for a speedy recovery. We lift up Pam Blank Gaslin, sister of Ron Blank, who passed away in December. We send condolences to Ron and their families. We hold Chris Yingst and her family in our hearts. Her mother, Mary Jane Connor, passed away earlier this week. I invite you now to say the name or to bring to mind those you wish to be held by the loving embrace of this religious community. In this great cloud of witness and memory, amid this beloved community, we hear these names and hold them in our hearts. We pause in awe and wonder of the mystery that is life. And so in the spirit of love, in the spirit of hope, and in the spirit of compassion, I invite each of you to enter into a time of silent prayer, meditation, or reflection.
This morning, our offering will be shared with the Rutherford B. H. Yates Museum in Freedmanstown. Please enjoy this video tour of the museum.
Lou Williams is proud of where she grew up.
It was a very good experience for a young person.
Lou grew up in Freedmanstown, built by a community of freed slaves and their descendants in the late 1800s and early 1900s. They built homes, churches, businesses, and even the roads.
African Americans put those bricks out there on Andrew Street, and they've been there over 100 years.
But sadly, Freedmanstown and the community that built it is in danger of being forgotten. The Rutherford B.H. Yates Museum was established to make sure that doesn't happen. Dr. Theophilus Harrington is the president of the Yates Museum.
What Yates Museum will do is to have a footprint around education, archaeology, research, and of course preservation. The Yates Museum has 10 properties, and on those properties we have 6 structures,
including houses of special historical significance.
That's a house that was occupied by the first African-American lawyer, attorney in the Houston area.
His goal is clear.
That we can show people who were here and the kind of struggle that they went through to have a point of significance as a neighborhood and a community in Houston.
To preserve this community, the Yates Museum needs help from the larger Houston community.
So those 6 structures need some kind of maintenance or restoration.
Volunteers from the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston have been offering their time, energy, and money for over 15 years.
Who's been working diligently to bring those projects to stabilization, and one to near completion that we hope we'll have a soft opening sometime this year for. We are undertaking a capital fundraising campaign, and that campaign is going to be over, of course, some years. We will be able to preserve the property structures that we have.
When the houses are returned to their original glory, Theo and Lou see the museum as a symbol to show others what this community achieved.
We need to pass that on to our children and grandchildren or whatever.
Protecting it and passing it on.
Yeah.
Protecting it and passing it on.
Today, through our shared offering to the Yates Museum, we are helping to promote preservation, education, archaeology, and research of African diaspora history in our region. So we ask you to give generously. An offering will now gratefully be received.
Destino de un insecto por Ernesto Cardenal. Estaba yo en mi hamaca, mirando la pared blanca, pensando quién sabe en qué.
Destiny of an Insect by Ernesto Cardenal. I was in my hammock, staring at the white wall, thinking God knows what.
Y de pronto, un punto negro en la pared, y rápido una salamandra rutilante, salida quién sabe de dónde, corrió hacia él.
And suddenly a black dot on the wall, and swiftly a gleaming salamander appeared from God knows where, ran toward it.
Andando en la pared vertical como en suelo plano, y ya no hubo más punto negro, y se fue.
Walking on the vertical wall as though on a flat floor, and then there was no more black dot, and it vanished.
Eso a mí me gustó. Se lo comió como yo como todos comemos, y como Cristo comió en banquetes alegres con pecadores, y él mismo se dio como comida.
I liked that. I ate it up just as I eat, as we all eat, and as Christ ate in joyous banquets with sinners, and he gave himself as food.
Me gustó. Todo es comida en el cosmos, y solo quedó la pared blanca otra vez.
I liked it. everything is food in the cosmos, and once again nothing left but the white wall.
Spirit of truth, of life, of power, we bring ourselves as gifts to Thee. Oh, bind our hearts this sacred hour in faith and hope and charity.
This morning's sermon draws inspiration from two people. The first is longtime member of the congregation, the Reverend Dr. Leonore Montgomery. The second is my friend and academic colleague, Dr. Kate Coyer. The title, Truth and Lies, originates in the annual congregational auction. Many of you probably know that as part of the auction, you can bid on the right to pick a topic for the sermon. Leonora won last year, and she asked me to do a sermon on the question of knowledge. She's particularly interested in a phenomenon she has observed in recent years. Everyone seems to be getting their news from different sources. Leonora, as you might remember, just turned 98. She has children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. When we were talking about what I might preach on, she observed that each generation appears to be getting its news from disparate places. People from one generation read the newspapers and watch television. Younger generations turn to the internet and the ever-expanding multiverse of social media. Some prefer Twitters, others prefer Discord, Facebook, or Instagram. In such a fragmented situation, she wonders, how is it possible for us to construct a shared sense of reality? Kate is a media studies scholar and an expert on misinformation, disinformation, and social media. Some of you might have seen the Ministers' Forum we did together at the start of the pandemic. She is an excellent source on how the rise of social media has impacted political discourse and threatened democratic practice. It also has fueled extremism. In a recent report with Richard Higgett, she's argued that the power of social media giants has raised serious questions about the future of democracy and national sovereignty. They argued that the struggle between the tech sector and the state for control of digital governance will have profound implications for who can share and gather data and information via the ever-evolving platforms we interact with through our smartphones and computers. After Leonora assigned me the sermon topic, I asked Kate to graciously provide me with a reading list on the issue at the heart of the sermon. Now, since this is a sermon, I'm going to begin with a theological claim. Religious difference hinges upon the question of knowledge. What are the sources that offer us an authentic account of what is real and true in the world? John 8:32, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. But what is the truth? Who or what is a source and authority for whom we can turn to for the truth? These issues have been debated since the first groups of humans encountered each other. Actually, arguing over the nature of truth and what is true is at the very core of human experience. We are subjective creatures caught in what appears to be an objective reality. So much depends upon whether or not we can agree upon what is real and what is not. The world's different religions offer accounts about what is real that are often at odds with each other. Either Jesus is Lord and Savior of the world, or he is not. Either Muhammad, blessed be his name, is God's messenger, or he is not. Either Buddha shows the path to enlightenment, or he does not. Either Krishna is the origin of all things, or he is not. Either Zeus is the father of all the gods and the ruler of the cosmos, or he is not. Either, well, you get the point. Unitarian Universalism, you might recall, tries to reconcile these different truth claims by arguing that direct experience, subjective experience, is the starting point for theological reflection. The first source of our religious association is, after all, direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures. We have been reflecting on this source for the last month. It implies a particular method for constructing a theology. First comes our direct experiences. Second, the stories we tell each other about our experiences. Third, the systemization or amalgamation of these stories into something that resembles a shared narrative. Actually, the process is not quite that neat. We're born into a shared narrative, a culture, with its particular claims about what is true and what is not. Describing the process, the Unitarian Universalist theologian Tandeyeka writes, "Human knowledge is mediated by human feeling. What is real and what we experience as real is rooted in what we feel. The words and stories we use to describe the experiences come from the culture and societies around us." Forrest Church, another Unitarian Universalist theologian, used the metaphor of the cathedral of the world to depict what is going on. He offered an invitation to imagine a day in which you wake up in a vast cathedral. It is a world of light and dancing shadow, stone and glass, life and death. Looking about you, you discover an ancient building, the cornerstone, the first altar, marked with the tincture of blood and blessed by tears. Wander it as you might, you can never find the beginning or the end. There is an infinitude of windows, glorious windows, some representational, some unfolding fractals of blue, green, purple, magenta. Some are an ever-changing liquid, forming and reforming new images incessantly. Others are static. Some are ancient as the redwoods. Others are being built right as you walk through the cathedral. Each, Church wrote, tells a story about the creation of the world, the meaning of history, the purpose of life, the nature of humanity, the mystery of death. The light that shines through them is being itself. It shines within us and throughout the entire cathedral. Each window is an articulation of how a person, a culture, a community attempts to understand and fails to fully understand the shining light. The experience, the view had through each window is only partial. It is incomplete. No one person can ever gaze through all the windows or have complete knowledge. You and I, every human being, is stuck with our subjective experience and challenged to construct it from the windows that we can see through, an account of the world we share. I imagine that some of you versed in philosophy might object to this metaphor as essentially Platonic. Caught in Plato's cave, we can only see the shadows of what is rather than what actually is. But is that not how the brain actually works? It attempts to create a representation of reality based on the information that is available. That information is always less than the sum of the all, and the mind fills in the gaps to create an experience that seems plausible. I was reminded of this only yesterday while I was out for a bike ride. I was heading home from the bayou, traveling down a side street as dusk came on. Another rider was coming towards me. I glanced up, and my mind interpreted the light through my eyes as depicting a woman wearing a mask. We rode towards each other for a couple of seconds. She was wearing a mask. She was wearing a mask. And then I realized she was not wearing a mask. I anticipated seeing someone who was wearing a mask, and so I did see someone wearing a mask until it was obvious that the other rider was in fact not wearing a mask. My subjective experience of the world was disrupted by what actually was in the world. I was trapped in my false view until I was shaken out of it. I do want to pause here and plead with those of you who are watching this to wear your mask whenever you are in public. I have one on whenever I go for a walk or a bike ride. I really think about it as a moral statement. It's a way of saying, I care enough about you that if I have the virus and do not know it, I don't want to infect you. My predisposition is then to assume that other people will be wearing masks because they want to make a similarly compassionate moral statement. I imagine that in this time of plague and pestilence, it's the moral thing to do. Of course, many do not agree with me, and my own preferences seem to shape my perception of the world so much that I sometimes see things, like a fellow bike rider wearing a mask, that are not actually there. Have you ever had a similar experience, where you assume something will be one way and then have your own subjective experience, your assumptions disrupted when you encounter what is actually there? I have them more often than I would like to admit. When I do, I try, as best I can, to accept what actually is rather than what I would like there to be. The United States is in the midst of an unfolding and social and political crisis precisely because there is a segment of people who refuse to accept what actually exists. There is incredible discord because one group of partisans refuses to embrace the shared sense of reality held by much of the rest of society. New York Times columnist Paul Krugman recently wrote about this dynamic. The Republican Party is stuck, perhaps irreversibly, in a doom loop of bizarro. Many of its supporters and many of its leaders refuse to recognize the legitimacy of the recent election results. At least 2 Republican members of the House of Representatives adhere to the strange conspiracy theory QAnon, which claims that the United States is being run by a coterie of pedophiles. This evil group, QAnon adherents believe, will be dislodged from power by none other than a man accused of sexual assault by more than 25 women, former President Trump. Houstonian and longtime Republican Party donor Jacob Monti has left the party because conspiracy theories have become mainstream within it. He's sick of so many of his fellow Republicans who are so blind they can defy reality. While he is not alone, his views are far from the majority position held within his party. Texas Senator Ted Cruz, after all, gave credence to the conspiracy theory that the election was somehow fraudulent on the floor of the Senate. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy voted against certifying the presidential election, an election which notably returned him to his seat, and continues to support former President Trump. The problem is rooted in the dynamic Leonora asked me to reflect upon. If people choose their own sources of information, how are we to share a sense of reality? If I listen to Democracy Now! And NPR, watch The Daily Show and the PBS NewsHour, read The Economist and the New York Times, and follow Doug Henwood and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on Twitter, and you listen to Rush Limbaugh and Alex Jones, watch Fox News and the One America Network, read the Claremont Review of Books and the Wall Street Journal opinion page, and follow the Trump family and Marjorie Greene Taylor online, then it can be quite difficult for us to agree upon what is actually happening in the world. The later set of sources, of course, often peddle lies. This can make them more appealing than sources that frequently offer facts. The philosopher Hannah Arendt long argued that false narratives, particularly false narratives of racial difference, are found at the heart of totalitarian movements. She observed, factual truths are never compellingly true. They need testimony to be remembered and trustworthy witnesses to be established. If facts are not things we observe firsthand, they require we trust the source from which they come. Facts are inherently fragile things. Lies, in contrast, she argued, are often more plausible, more appealing to reason than reality, since the liar has the great advantage of knowing beforehand what the audience wishes or expects to hear. Lies often confirm what we anticipate to be true. Facts often disrupt it. Take the two recent presidential elections. The fact of the 2016 election was it exposed that white supremacy continues to be an operative and powerful force in the politics of the United States. The fact of the 2020 election was that a white supremacist presidential candidate cannot win in a free and fair election if anti-racists and those disgusted by blatant white supremacy organize against him. In the first instance, many liberals and moderates refused to face the fact of the 2016 election until the hour was quite late. There was a great deal of give him a chanceism floating around the editorial pages of major metropolitan newspapers after the election, even when it was obvious to those of us who study race and fascism what was going on. In the second instance, many reactionaries and racists refused to accept that a country that they imagined to be the property of white people could vote against a man who claims to be the white savior. In order for either liberals or reactionaries to figure out a path forward for the political party they favor, they have to embrace the political facts. The Democrats eventually did this and won the 2018 and 2020 elections. It remains to be seen whether the Republican Party will eventually come around to realize that the path to political power no longer runs through an exclusive allegiance to whiteness and the lies of Trump and his allies that support it. At about this time in 2017, I was having my own op-eds routinely rejected and my sermons walked out on when I called the former president a white supremacist by many of the same people who later vigorously opposed his illiberalism and racism. Maybe Krugman is wrong, and once the shock of defeat wears off, Republicans will decide to break the doom loop of Bizarro. I suspect that if they do, they will only break the loop through an intervention. The art of politics, Arendt argued, lies in the ability to make distinctions. The ability to make distinctions is a skill that people are taught, not a talent that they have inherently. Regulation and education will be required if social media's ever-expanding set of platforms is to be tamed and a sense of shared reality is to be established. There will need to be consequences for people like the former president or the QAnon representatives in the House who knowingly peddle lies. Twitter, of course, enacted a consequence for the former president and some of his chief propagandists by removing them from the platform. My friend Kate has argued that leaving such actions to the whims of corporations is undemocratic. While no one has a right to a platform, free speech does not mean that a newspaper has to print whatever I write. Twitter also should not be allowed to determine who gets to speak and who doesn't. That is, in a democratic society, up for elected representatives or the people themselves to decide. Allowing Twitter to regulate itself means removing elected representatives from the process of determining what kind of speech we want to have available on online platforms. Legislators have passed laws allowing newspapers to be sued for slander. The same standard could be applied to social media. Doing so would place a limit on what the platform can be used for, not on what individual people can say. Now, I recognize that regulation is often a dirty word, and I anticipate that some of you do not agree that it should be extended to social media. Even if it is not, education can play a role in helping more firmly establish a sense of shared reality. The scholar Claire Wardell has distinguished 3 different types of information disorder that do harm via social media. There is disinformation, content that is intentionally false and designed to cause harm. There is misinformation, false content shared by a person who does not realize that it is false or misleading. And malinformation, genuine information that is shared with the intent to cause harm. Wardell has pointed out that much of the issue lies with people who make problematic statements, and Wardell has pointed out that the issue lies much less with people who make problematic statements, and much more with the underlying algorithms that promote different kinds of speech on social media. Social media companies exist to make money. The more you engage with them, the more they make. The more you are more likely to engage with them, the more they offer you emotionally impactful interactions. Here we find ourselves back with Tendeka and her claim that theological reflection begins with our emotional experiences. Our engagement with social media begins with emotional satisfaction, often fleeting and illusory, that we gain through it. It can be tempered with the application of reason and the regulation of those algorithms. Wardell argues that the way forward is to teach people to distinguish between different kinds of information disorder and more reliable sources of information. It begins with a simple choice to pause before you retweet or like something, and to make the decision to read the article or piece in question before you retweet it or like it. Now, this might seem difficult given the way we scroll through things on our phones, but it is not impossible, especially if every person recognizes how they too can become a vector in the information war, as Wardell tells us. Such individual responsibility lies at the core of the democratic tradition and indeed within Unitarian Universalism itself. Will teaching it be enough? The future is as of yet unwritten. What I can tell you is this: the only way to construct a shared sense of reality lies through what the Unitarian minister A. Powell Davies once called the temptation to be good. He believed we are all aware that goodness is a possible choice, and we can choose it. We can all be aware that pausing, thinking, reflecting before we tweet or like or engage with social media can have an impact, however small, on lessening the amount of lies in the world. Davies preached, the world falls apart not through evil, deliberately chosen evil, but because people resist the temptation to be good. The temptation to be good is found in pausing and thinking before interacting with social media. The temptation to be good is found in recognizing the truth found in Forrest Church's metaphor of the cathedral of the world. There is a shared reality of which we are all a part. The temptation to be good is found in the recognition attested to in our poem this morning. Everything is food in the cosmos, for no matter our perspective, priest lying in bed, salamander, or insect on the wall, we are all part and parcel of each other. Recognizing, opening ourselves to that simple truth, attested in the different traditions of the world and in the different subjective experiences of so many, is the only way to have a sense of shared reality. Indeed, it has always been the only way to have a sense of shared reality. May we recognize that truth, accept our responsibility, pause before we retweet, question what we read, and in doing so, give ourselves over to the temptation to be good. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be.
Not in vain the distance beacons. Forward, forward, let us range. Let the great world spin forever down the ringing grooves of change. Through the shadow of the globe we sweep ahead to heights sublime. We, the heirs of all the ages, in the foremost files of time. Oh, we see the crescent promise of that spirit has not set. Ancient founts of inspiration well through all our fancies yet. And we doubt not through the ages one increasing purpose runs, and the thoughts of all are widened with the process of the suns. Yea, we dip into the future far as human eye can see the vision of the world and all the wonder that shall be. Hear the war drum throb no longer, see the battle flags all furled in the Parliament of Freedom, Federation of the World.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
We end our service with the hope that we might each give ourselves over to the temptation to be good and take responsibility for what we share and how we share it. We end our service with the knowledge that the future and the choice to lie or share the real is ever within our human hands. We end our service with the desire, with the aspiration that all might choose wisely and choose the good. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be.
Please join me in thanking Alma Vizcarra, our Membership and Communications Coordinator, for participating in today's service, and Mark Vogel, our Music Director, for the beautiful music. For those of you who may be new to this congregation or our online services, let me say a few words about Unitarian Universalism. Unitarian Universalism is a faith where you can bring your whole self, your full identity, your questioning mind, and your expansive heart. As Unitarian Universalists, we join together on a journey that honors everywhere we've been before. Together, we create a force more powerful than one person or one belief system. Our beliefs are diverse and inclusive. Rather than a creed, we share a covenant based on a set of 7 principles. These include the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and the knowledge that we are part of an interconnected web of all existence that calls us to honor the earth and all creatures. Thank you for being with us today.
While our church's buildings is closed, our church's people is still meeting, but now online. There are weekly and monthly offerings to keep you connected and engaged with our community. Join us this morning at 11:30 for the Coffee Half Hour. There's no topic or agenda. Log in to interact, chat, and laugh with new and old friends. The Women's Book Club will meet Monday at 7 to discuss Gentlemen Prefer Blondes by Anita Luz and Jenny McPhee, and Mrs. Everything by Jennifer Weiner. Join the Wednesday evening discussions for fun, facilitated, and educational conversations on a variety of topics. This week, Kim will lead a conversation asking, "What is the meaning of dreams?" Log in between 4:45 and 5 to meet and greet others before the discussion. The Sanctuary Choir meets virtually Thursday at 7:30 and is welcoming new voices. Email mark@firstuuhouston.org for the link. The men's group meets Thursday at 7 for their monthly evening of conversation, and the UU Young Adults group meets Friday at 3. Many of the topics for upcoming discussion groups are on our website, firstuuhouston.org/online-group-meetings. Visit there for more details and to sign up. And remember, all times shown are Central Standard Time.